A while back, I made a video ranking the nitrogen characters of Thomas. Of course, in order to refresh myself on said characters and learn about the ones I knew little of, I had to watch the entire era of the show. I decided as long as I was dragging myself through that, I would make a second video about it to get twice the content out of one watch through. So I tallied up my personal top 10 worst and best episodes of the era, and some of you have asked for a follow-up on the Hit Era's episodes. So, let's do it! As requested, I will tally up my top 10 best and worst episodes of the Hit Era. Just like last time, we'll go from least to worst of each, and switch between each list as we go. And I'm warning you now, there are quite a few hot takes on this list. And to be fair and add some variety here, I'm putting a limit on how many bad Scarlotti episodes and good Gordon episodes will be included. Without any further ado, let's hop in. Number 10.
Don't go back.
Thomas is instructed to shun to train for Henry, and Diesel says he will finish his job first. He then challenges Thomas to a race, but they have to go backwards. He wins, but Thomas crashes into him. Being a sore loser, Thomas starts another race, which he wins, but derails Mavis in the process. They decide to have another race, which results in them both crashing Ari and Bert through the back of the sheds. At that moment, Henry arrives for his train, so Thomas goes and does the job he's been neglecting. He then helps re-rail Mavis, Ari, and Bert before he and Diesel both help clear debris from the shed. When they finish, they have one more race which ends in a tie. I have several points of complaints against this episode. Firstly, Thomas crashes into Mavis, but he doesn't even hear, see, or feel her. Even when he passes her right afterwards, she's just ignored.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
It takes the foreman telling him that she's been derailed for Thomas to realize, oh crap, that was my fault. And after they put things right, Diesel and Thomas both show how much they've learned from this experience. That being, absolutely nothing, as they have another race which ends in a tie. Wasn't the point of the final race to learn which was the fastest? It totally defeats the purpose for them both to win. And why isn't Diesel reprimanded with Thomas? He crashed into Ari and Bert too, and started this whole mess to begin with. So yeah, while not the worst, this one's quite bad in my eyes.
Thomas and the runaway car.
Thomas is tasked with taking the Fat Controller's new car to a show, and Gordon says he'll be there first with his delivery. In order to beat him, Thomas doesn't wait to be coupled. So when he gets to the top of Gordon's hill, the car becomes a runaway and Thomas has to chase after it. Chaos ensues until the flatbed crashes and the car is flung into a haystack. So Thomas asks Gordon for help by collecting Rocky and thanks him by giving him his special. First off, this episode has a great portrayal of the dynamic between Thomas and Gordon, especially when Gordon decides to help Thomas, which follows along with their alliance. He helps Thomas, and Thomas gives him the job that every engine on the island wanted. I particularly like this bit here.
Please, Gordon, would you go and collect Rocky? It needs a strong engine like you. Gordon liked everyone to know he was strong.
Being recognized for his strength and speed is something Gordon takes great pride in, so for Thomas to appeal to his ego is fun to see. As for the rest of the episode, the runaway is pretty fun and kinda goofy to watch. It gives the same vibes as Thomas and the Jet Engine or Busy Going Backwards. We also get returning characters like Rosie and Arthur, who are always fun to see. Overall, a fun episode that highlights Thomas and Gordon's friendship again. I really like this one.
9! It's 9!
Mighty Mac.
Now here's one of those hot takes I was talking about earlier. This one follows a new character, Mighty Mac, trying to get some passengers to a campground, but they're so busy fighting over which way to go that they end up lost, trapped behind a landslide, and pushing the coach off the tracks. The passengers are able to re-rail it in the end, and the two come together, mentally, to get to their final destination. I think most people like this one simply because Mighty Mac is such an interesting concept. And I agree that yeah, having a double-ended engine in the series is an inspired concept, and one I've talked about in other videos. But an interesting character basis doesn't excuse the terrible story here. These two are constantly fighting and putting themselves first. And by doing so, they not only endanger all their passengers, but make them clean up the mess. And somehow, the coaches move from one side of them to the other so they can pull from the opposite direction. If you ask me, the overall concept of the story was handled much better with the episode Love Me Tender. But that's another story for another time. So while I do like Mighty Mac as a character, this episode did a very poor job of introducing these two, and that's why it's on the list.
Duncan's Bluff.
James brings a train of coal to the wharf, and Duncan starts using him. He then challenges him to a race of who can deliver the coal first, which he of course loses. To cover for himself, he says that James hasn't brought enough coal, and while James goes to get more, he hides the truck so it looks like he's delivered it all. Unfortunately, James uses up all his coal and runs out of steam. Duncan owns up to his bluff and brings him some of the hidden coal. The two put the whole thing behind them and see how useful the other is.
James is a really useful engine, but then, so am I.
The Hit Era notoriously messed up the Narrowgauge engines, yet this episode stands out from the others for a few reasons. For one, I like that Duncan shows some growth from the classic series. Rather than being a pain in the butt to the other Scarlet OE engines, he redirects that behavior towards the bigger engines.
I've got an important job to do later. Oh, is doing 2 jobs in 1 day too hard for you?
Yet by getting in over his head and making a bet he can't live up to, he shows he still has a lot to learn. And pairing him up with James is a great decision. We don't see these two clash often, but when we do, it's so much fun. I also really like this scene.
You have caused delay and confusion, he said slowly. But you have told the truth, and a useful engine always tells the truth. I'll only be a really useful engine if I can help James, whistled Duncan.
Rather than dwelling on him owning up to his trick, Duncan is focused on putting things right. It's a shame that this is the highest ranking narrow gauge episode on the list, but it still very much deserves to be here.
Edward strikes out.
Edward arrives at the docks and meets Gordon, who is putting down the new crane named Rocky. Edward sides with him and turns down Rocky's help when he's offered it. But when he has to make a sudden stop, the pipes he is pulling fly everywhere and block the line. Things get worse when Gordon crashes into them, and while Harvey can lift one pipe at a time, Gordon is too heavy. So, Edward goes back to collect Rocky, and the two set about cleaning the mess. And everyone, including Gordon, come to see how useful Rocky is. This episode has one big problem and a few smaller issues on the side, the big one of course being Edward's character. He is shown as stubborn, hot-headed, and rude. He sides with Gordon in putting down Rocky, and is against the idea of new machines coming to the island.
I don't need your help, sniffed Edward. Newfangled nonsense.
All of these contradict his characterization from before. He was welcoming to diesels, a new technology, when they first came to the island, and he never supports Gordon in being rude. The main plot would have probably worked better if it had been about someone like James, who has been opposed to diesels and sided with Gordon before. But I don't think their story was written for any particular engine, and they decided on who would lead it after the fact.
Ah yes, I've finished writing a new episode that introduces our newest toy for us to market. I just need to decide who would be the main character for us to use in the story.
Here are your choices for the main characters.
So many to pick from. I can't choose. Edward! Perfect.
A few other nitpicks I have of the episode are the fact that Edward goes back to the docks by heading the opposite way. And for that matter, why is Gordon on his way back to the docks? But I will say it's interesting to see Rocky lifting Gordon up. I don't think we've ever seen this kind of thing on this scale before. The closest we got was James back in season 1. Overall, this episode does a very bad job of handling Edward and giving him flaws that don't suit his character.
Edward and the Mail.
You know, I didn't actually intend to have Edward's best and worst episodes right next to each other, but that's just the way things worked out. The plot of this one is that Percy has to be repaired, and someone else has to pull the mail train. Everyone unanimously votes Edward, but he's nervous that he's never pulled the train before. But he doesn't want to ask for help and shatter the faith his friends have in him. This leads to him delivering the wrong things to the wrong places, and having to go back and do it all over again. He finally asks Percy how to do it, and is able to fix his mess. Unlike Edward Strikes Out, this one feels especially written for Edward, and it shows that ironically, Edward's greatest strength is his biggest weakness. Everyone sees him as a symbol of perfection, a guiding figure who knows everything, and what are usually his best traits, his determination and willingness to help his friends, are used against him. He's the one everyone goes to for help, so he thinks if they see he needs help, he will let them down. He's trying to live up to the pedestal everyone puts him on, but even those who carry the team still need a hand every now and then, and by showing that even he needs guidance sometimes, makes him all the more approachable and trustworthy. Using the mail train as a thing Edward is inexperienced with also makes sense, as he has never pulled it before, and by accepting the help and guidance of his friends, Edward becomes all the wiser.
Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. Proverbs 9:9.
A great Edward episode if I ever saw one.
Which I have.
Well, yes, but I'm 7.
Toby's afternoon off.
Toby's about to go to the farm to see the animals when the Fat Controller gives him 3 jobs to do. So in order to finish on time and get to the farm, he decides to get one of his friends to help. But Mavis, Thomas, and Salty are all busy, leaving him to do it himself. But when his last job is put on hold due to his ship being delayed, he starts to go to the farm, only to find that the others have been helping Henry, who has broken down. So Toby gives up his trip to the farm and brings Henry's coaches back to Natford. Now, Toby's one of those characters the hit era notoriously messed up, and it definitely shows here. Out of nowhere, he wants to take time off to see the animals, which he should see every day while passing the farm. And when his friends say their jobs are too important to stop for, he decides that since they didn't help him slack off, they aren't his real friends.
And I thought they were my friends, puffed Toby sadly.
Also, another nitpick, but if Henry was already fixed up, why couldn't he pull his own coaches away? I was caught on whether I wanted to include this one over Toby's Triumph for a while, but ultimately went with this one because I can at least find a few positives with the latter. I can't really think of anything to like about this episode. Moving on.
Percy and the Bandstand.
Percy is helping Jack and Alfie build a new bandstand at Great Waterton. The Vat Controller then asks him to bring Lady Hat to the concert, but it has to be a surprise. But she decides to go to 3 other places, and Percy can't tell her where they're supposed to be going. So finally, he uses his Do As I Say whistle to get her to come with him, and the concert is a success. I really didn't expect this one to make the cut, honestly, but what got it in here is how it used Percy while building upon his previous hit era episodes. He learned to stand up for himself in Percy the Oil Painting, he learned to pull passengers from Gordon in Gordon Takes Charge, he got a sense of authority in the Green Controller, and uses his loud whistle from Percy's new whistle for good. I really like how he's responsible with it, and makes sure he doesn't disturb others.
I hope I didn't blow my whistle too loudly.
Not at all, Percy. You showed you were in charge.
Percy was relieved.
This really feels like Percy's finale for the hit era, but it doesn't stop there. We see Great Waterton again, Edward is seen pulling the mail like Percy taught him to, and we even see Jack and Alfie return. Also, Lady Hat wants to see the bluebells in the forest, and it just so happens we saw Stepney earlier this season.
Coincidence? I think not!
And while it does have some terrible CGI that Season 12 is known for, I really appreciate this episode for how it ends Percy's time in the hit era.
Yeah, not 6 like me.
Thomas and the Big Bang.
Thomas gets a new whistle and has to collect loads from the narrow gauge engines. His whistle is so loud that it surprises Ranius into crashing into some trucks. So Thomas does the same to Rusty, Sir Handel, and Peter Sam, resulting in their loads getting messed up. They only stop when Peter Sam is so surprised that he crashes his flatbeds. After a scolding from Mr. Percival, Thomas gets to work, but hides his train behind some trucks. This allows him to play one last trick on Mr. Percival. So remember how Thomas warned Percy about using his whistle responsibly? Well, he sure as anything doesn't. Somehow, no one notices the mess that they're making out of Thomas's train because they all want to play. Even Sir Handel, who is supposed to be a wise engine in this era of the show for some reason. Like, the only character they didn't mess up here was Peter Sam, and he didn't even speak. Not to mention Thomas uses his whistle to scare the engines not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times in a row. And only then does everyone remember, oh wait, this stuff is supposed to go to Thomas's train, who'da thunk? I would not recommend this episode to anyone. Thomas saves the day. A new station is being built, and Thomas has to take the workmen there every day, but on the way he has to deal with a difficult bend. Usually, Annie and Clarabelle help him manage, but they have to go in for an overhaul. Without their help, Thomas forgets to take care on the bend and crashes. Harvey reveals and encourages him, but Thomas is still scared. But when he sees some runaway trucks heading towards a new station, it's up to him to beat them there to warn the signalmen and save the workmen. And when he comes to the difficult bend, he remembers to slow down and be careful, and is able to get there first. And thanks to him, the trucks are diverted into a siding and the station is saved. First off, I like the use of Annie and Clarabelle here. This is one of the rare instances of the hit era where they do more than just quietly follow Thomas. They sing out to him and help him when he's in trouble. But there are times when you need to stand alone to face your fears, so they have to be separated. And while it does take some time, Thomas is finally able to do it on his own. They also do a really good job of building up a sense of danger here. Not only does he have to face his fears alone, but if he fails, many people could get hurt and the station could be ruined. The crash is also pretty good for what it's worth. While I've never really given this episode much thought before, I think it's a good one to include on the list.
Now number 5.
Skarloey storms through.
During a big storm, a farmer needs help getting his sheep down from the hills, so Peter, Sam, Ranius, and Skarloey are assigned to the job. But Skarloey is scared of the big storm, so he decides to hide while the others do the work. That is until they run out of coal, and he has to do the rest of the job despite his fear. To start off, we can now add lightning to the growing list of hit Skarloey's list of fears.
I'm afraid of lightning!
And let's not forget, he was slacking off during an emergency. You do know what an emergency is, right? And how did Ranius and Peter Sam not see him? He is in plain sight. And one more thing. When he finally does come out to get his work done, the narrator says he doesn't notice a storm.
There was another flash of lightning and a roar of thunder, but Skarloey didn't notice.
I don't care if you are or aren't scared of thunder or lightning, you will notice it. You don't just overcome your fear by saying you didn't notice it. Percy and the Oil Painting. A famous artist is coming to the island to paint the spirit of Sodor. Percy is assigned to showing him all the sides of Sodor to inspire him, but the artist turns his nose up and finds something wrong with every place he's brought to. And every time, Percy wants to speak up, but he doesn't want to get in trouble. Until the artist says that there's nothing special on Sodor, and he finally snaps and yells at him. And in a twist, the artist decides to paint him, as he believes he holds all the qualities that make Sodor special. First off, this episode nails Percy's character to a T. He's respectful towards authority, but is also very passionate and loyal to all he loves. He enjoys being a steam engine and working on Zodar, so when someone undermines that, his temper flares up and he gives them a piece of his mind.
Everywhere on Sodor is special, Pete Percy. And so are the people, and the children, and the engines. We are all special.
In fact, this just might be my favorite Percy solo episode in the whole show, with a good message to boot. Sometimes the authority figure is wrong and you need to speak up. This doesn't mean yell at them over every disagreement, but you need to know where the line is and keep it from being crossed. This is also a similar message to respect for Gordon, but a little less simple. You can't just walk all over someone and expect them to respect you. It's something you have to earn, not to be demanded. And if all you do is take without giving, then there will come a time when others won't respect you. They might fear you or the prospect of getting in trouble like Percy does here, but they won't respect you. Quite a lot to fit into one episode, but I think it pulls it off really well.
Actually, Toph, there's 4 of us.
Follow that flower.
Thomas is shunting at the wharf when James arrives with an important job. He asks Thomas to shunt him a truck of flour while he fills up on water. Thomas bumps it too hard and decides to hide it. So as he runs off, he leaves a trail of flour and a clear path for James to follow. After hiding 3 times, James finally corners Thomas and he notices the trail of flour. So now Thomas has to go get more flour from the mill, but it's closed for the day. But with James's help, they're able to get the 1 truck of flour for his special. There is just so much wrong with this episode. Firstly, Thomas causes all this trouble for no reason other than jealousy. James didn't even provoke him. All he did was ask Thomas to shunt his truck while he filled up on water. Quite politely, I might add.
First, I have to take on water. Please shunt the flour car over for me, Thomas.
And Thomas complains it will take him longer, but then he forgets that and decides to play hide and seek. What was your end goal here? James didn't waste your time. You wasted his and your own. And not only that, but Thomas is also blind to the flour trail he's leaving, even when he reverses into a siding, and it's right in front of him. Another thing, why do they need to move every truck at the flour mill when all they need is 1 truck at the back of 1 siding? Just pull out the line of trucks, get the one you need, and put the rest back. Finally, why does this episode begin with exposition about the Narrowgauge engines? They aren't even in the story, what's this here for? This is a terrible episode that unfortunately set a trend for most of its respective season. Gordon takes charge. With a heavy winter snowfall, many of the roads are blocked, so this means that more people are taking the trains, and the Fat Controller puts Percy on passenger work and tells Gordon to show him what to do. While he is hesitant at first, Gordon soon finds the opportunity to show off to Percy enjoyable. He starts nitpicking everything that Percy gets wrong, and undermines him when he improves. But he's so focused on showing off that he forgets to be careful on the icy rails and crashes into a snowbank. This leaves his passengers to walk to the platform, while Percy makes a perfect stop in the station. At the end of the day, Gordon has Percy show him how good he is instead of showing off himself, but he does take credit for teaching him well. Firstly, I like how Percy is hesitant to pull passengers with his limited experience. He's a small industrial shunter, so passengers aren't really common for him. Not to mention that Gordon, one of the best passenger engines on the island, will oversee his progress. And in true Gordon fashion, he jumps at the chance to be recognized for how good he is.
Watch how smoothly I can go!
But at the end of the day, it's not about how good you look when you do the job, but getting the job done well and on time that matters. It also puts Gordon in a mentor role, something new for him, which I wish they expanded on more down the line. We also get some really good nighttime shots at the end. A great episode for both Gordon and Percy, and one of my favorites from this era.
3.
Topped off Thomas.
Thomas meets Spencer, who is collecting the hats and the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. Thomas is jealous and Spencer puts him down, so he challenges him to a race. But he goes so fast that he blows the Fat Controller's hat off into the wind. So he has to go and retrieve the hat in time for their tea, but every time he sees it, it blows away. Thomas apologizes to the wind and asks it for help, and the hat lands on his funnel. And then he returns the hat to the Fat Controller. This episode pushes the stupidity to an all-time high. The biggest point is him talking to the wind like it's sentient. Mr. Snowman was one thing, but this is atrocious. And why would you send an engine to look for a hat? He can only go where the track goes. And it really doesn't matter in the end, because all the smoke, fumes, and ashes from Thomas's funnel will spoil the hat. And there's the fact that he can somehow go as fast as Spencer, an A4 Pacific, aka the fastest steam locomotive in the world.
I am speed.
The same problem arises in Here Are the Rails, but at least that scene had some tension. Here, Thomas is just jealous that he can't do Spencer's job. The Duke and Duchess are involved. Why would they choose you over their own private locomotive? This episode also ruins Spencer's streak of good rival stories we built up. Gordon and Spencer was a fantastic episode that concluded Gordon's arc in the classic series. and Edward the Great highlighted Edward's determination while also adapting the story of the tortoise and the hare. But in this one, Spencer's dynamic with Thomas is meaningless. You could easily switch him out with Gordon, James, or even Hitler or Emily if you took out the Duke and Duchess. Also, this episode goes back on previous continuity from As Good as Gordon, because Gordon goes right through the station without stopping for Bertie's passengers. For all that, this episode more than deserves to be on the list.
Emily knows best.
Emily is taking some tourists to a ruined castle, but she gets bored of waiting for them, so she goes to see Percy and Toby who are shunting nearby. And with the castle leaving her with thoughts of queens of old, she offers to play queens with Percy. Toby meanwhile has to shunt his own trucks away, but tells Percy that if he can't handle his train, he'll come back to help him and tell him what to do. But Emily instead tells him to go down the track she's on and move the trucks faster. This, however, leads him to crashing into Mavis and derails Toby when he returns. Emily admits that she can't be queen, and Toby tells her to go to the nearest station for help. And after everything is put right, Emily decides to leave the leadership up to more experienced engines like Toby. When most people think of this episode, the main thing that sticks out is Toby being in character for the only time in this whole era. And yeah, it's great to see him here, both seeing him as a mentor to Percy and laughing at Emily's foolishness.
You have to be clever to be a queen and know the right thing to do. I always know what to do. Toby laughed.
And as good as that is, there's so much more to this episode that makes this one of the best of the era. For one thing, it actually follows real-life railway procedures, like how Percy going down an already occupied line leads to a collision, or how he and Toby have to wait to be coupled up before setting off. The crash is also very unique, as we don't see the moment of impact. This makes more room for the film crew to make the aftermath look as bad as possible. Having engines crash on camera is great, but sometimes something happens where they have to adjust the scene to allow character expressions. For example, keeping up with James. When he comes off the rails, his face is covered in snow, but in the following shot, they cleared most of the snow away from his face. Not having the crash on screen allows them to be more creative with the scene of a destruction. Note that one of the trucks brings down the telephone pole, thus cutting off communications, or all the arrangements of debris and wrecked trucks, and how they give Toby damaged cowcatchers off screen. And of course, I can't forget to cover the lesson this episode teaches. It takes more than style and confidence to be a good leader. You need to know how to handle any given situation, both in times of peace and chaos. Emily makes a split-second decision, and wants to lead not for the good of others, but so she can have a place of power. Meanwhile, Toby has experience with guiding both Mavis and Daisy onto the right path, and being a mentor to Percy, in addition to his vast knowledge of dealing with trucks, which more than qualifies him to be a good leader. He may not look the part, but he knows what's best and how to put things right. A great message for a fantastic episode, but the last two have something that sends them just a little bit higher, and I'll touch more on that when we get to them.
Tuneful toots.
Rusty likes it when he toots his own horn, but the other engines don't. The Fat Controller and his wife are planning to visit the Percivals, and a brass band is coming to play. So Rusty takes them on a tour before they perform. But when they start to tune their instruments, he enjoys the music so much he forgets to bring them back for the concert and eventually runs out of fuel. So he honks his horn while they play their instruments to tell everyone where they are. When they hear the noise, the Fat Controller decides to have the concert at the lake, and all the other engines tell Rusty his horn is special. I have a very good reason for putting this one so high, and it's Rusty's horn. In total, he honks it 52 times. That's more than 7 times each minute, and it gets really annoying really fast. And in the end, Rusty says he'll never be shy about using his horn again.
I shall never be shy about my special horn again, Rusty tooted.
If this was you restraining yourself, I dread to think what would happen if you let loose. I'm with the other narrative engines on this one. And having Rusty be so irresponsible both as his horn and not taking the band back was very out of character. As a maintenance diesel, he's supposed to be one of the most responsible engines. It's like they're writing for a totally different character. For that matter, I doubt anyone writing this episode knew anything about Rusty. Do you ever notice in the US dub, Michael Brandon's line delivery changes constantly throughout the episode? Well, that's because in the original episode, they mistakenly referred to Rusty as female. When they realized their mistake, they had Brandon re-record the lines where Rusty's gender is mentioned.
When Rusty pulled into the transfer yards, Mr. Percival was waiting with the brass band. Rusty couldn't help but toot his horn.
But even then, the voice he originally gave him still sounds like a girl, in contrast to the voice he used in later episodes.
I'm going to give the brass band the best tour ever, he said.
Bust my buffers,
Rusty honked.
The signpost must be all pointing in the wrong direction.
We've seen a lot of characters messed up, but nothing this bad until now. Even so, there's still one episode that's worse than this.
Hector the Horrid.
James and Edward have to make a large delivery of coal, and Thomas is told to shunt and fill their trains. Meanwhile, Bill and Ben are bringing a giant truck named Hector to the coaling plant, and it's causing them a lot of trouble. Thomas thinks nothing of it until he tries to shunt him and gets scared away, so he shunts all the other trucks until the yardmaster tells him to shunt Hector. Rosie arrives to help, but Hector frightens her away. Thomas's fear turns to wrath, to the point where he forces Hector off the track. He then finds out Hector was acting out of fear, not having been filled with coal before. So when he's revealed, Thomas shows him that there's nothing to be afraid of, and convinces him to be filled with coal. And as he leaves on James's train, Thomas wishes him good luck. This episode is an absolute masterpiece. Not only do we get a great selection of old and new characters here, but everyone is in character. They also introduce Hector, one of the best Hit era newbies. What's great about him is he gives us a better insight into bullies and why they act the way they do. In order to avoid his fear, he puts on a big bad persona to scare everyone away. And when it fails him, he breaks down and spills everything. It's also great to see Rosie, and how the writers continued her sibling-like relationship with Thomas. But I've already talked more about her in a different video, so I'll leave it at that. It's also nice to see Bill and Ben here, and it even builds off the last season with James and Edward working together following James' second best. But the best character in this episode is Thomas himself. Accurate to his maturity from the later classic series, he doesn't stand up to Hector for bullying him, but in defense of his friends. And when he derails him, he doesn't just take the win and let it be, but instead reaches out to him and helps him redeem himself. This is the kind of thing the Hit era did pretty well, and something you wouldn't find in the earlier seasons. Remember Toad Stands By, where Oliver ripped Scruffy apart and instilled fear into the other trucks. But it was just left at that. The Hit era really liked to show this new side of the characters. Some episodes like Respect for Gordon or Emily and the Special Coaches come to mind. But the main reason I love this episode, and why I look forward to it every time, is the part where Thomas loses his cool. Everything is played just right. The music building up as his anger rises, his steam hissing everywhere, him thinking back to everything Hector has done to his friends, and the narration from Michael Brandon is top notch. As far as I'm concerned, this is his best performance in the show, both for how he expresses Thomas's emotions and the roaring voice he gives Hector. All this built up to Thomas ramming into him, and you can just feel the power he releases there. It's just done so well. All this done in one episode. I'd recommend it to anyone, Thomas fan or no. Now before we get to the worst episode, I want to put down some dishonorable mentions. It was tricky to narrow them down, so here's the ones that didn't make the final cut. Thomas keeps annoying James for his job, and thinks it's unfair he gets to pull the sports team twice in a row, even though he collects a Christmas tree almost every year. Otherwise, a very forgettable episode. This one goes so far as telling a 5-strike story, and basically follows the same plot as Thomas Gets It Right. Toby's a wimp again, and I hate Flora. This one didn't make it because everyone already knows how bad it is, and I'd just be repeating what everyone else has already said. I hate Coward Scarlowy, but this one goes too far in the other direction. Everyone's out of character, and the plot is nonsensical. This one was tied with Toby's afternoon off, but I was able to find some things to like about it in the latter half. Edward is out of character, the set design is terrible, and so is the CGI on Edward's face. But he wasn't the only one to suffer from this, which leads into the worst episode. And the number one worst episode of the Hit era is Push Me Pull You. Honestly, any Thomas fan would have seen this move coming from a mile away, or 1.6 kilometers. So Scarlowy hears there's a puppet show train, and he asks to pull it. And for some reason it's really heavy, but he rejects Rhaenys' offer to help him. Instead, he decides to play tug of war to decide who will pull it. A coupling snaps, and because his brakes have conveniently stopped working, he crashes into Duncan and Rhaenys' trains before falling into a pond. Rhaenys comes to help, and while he takes the puppet show train, Scarlowy brings Rusty new trucks and helps Duncan to the show. Firstly, let's address the giant, unavoidable elephant in the room. The CGI faces are terrible, especially on Scarlowy. And why would a simple puppet show train be so heavy or take so many trucks? And the fact they choose to play tug of war over it is so idiotic I can't stand it. And every time he sees someone ahead, his brakes just happen to stop working until the instant he crashes into the train. He doesn't even get his brakes checked over by the end. And why does Rusty stop on the crossing? And why is he playing ice cream on open wagons? It's gonna get warm and melt. Oh, too late. And how does Scarlowy get onto Duncan's line to help him to the show? Their lines don't connect. And it ends with a moral that has nothing to do with the plot whatsoever.
You're my best friend, Rhaenys. And there's nothing stronger than friendship.
Blech.
This episode ticks all the boxes for an abysmal episode. Awful character and assassination, check. Needless Thomas appearance, check. Gimmicky train, check. Terrible crashes, check. 3 strikes formula, check. Cheesy moral that's obviously stated at the end, check. This is the textbook definition of what not to do in an episode of Thomas or any other show for that matter, and is one of the top contenders for the worst episode of the whole show. Now, let's put on some honorable mentions. There were a lot that came to my attention on this rewatch, and I had a really hard time choosing some over the others. So let's go over some that didn't make it. Introduces Whiff, a really fun new engine, has some fun character cameos, we see the 3 big engines together again, and sets up Spencer in the following episode. Very nice autumn set design, and brings back characters like Murdoch, Trevor, Duck, and even Bulgy, but I can't really say it's a good story. A great episode that shows Gordon putting his passengers above his own well-being, and why we all love him. Another episode everyone has highlighted from the hit era and puts James in a very unique place as a character. Everything great about this episode has already been said, so highlighting it would be rather redundant. Still a personal favorite nonetheless. A great episode for all characters involved, especially Thomas. Shows Gordon's maturity and growth up to this point, and has some really good writing. Coming off the heels of the classic series, the hit era made a lot of changes. The writing was more simplistic, there were fewer characters seen, a longer runtime of 7 minutes, promoting Emily to main character status, and adding learning segments. And this wasn't the only time a large-scale reboot occurred, with later eras starting off in many different ways. When making all these changes to a well-beloved show, it's crucial not to alienate your audience and make a good first impression. So how did the hit era do this? They gave us Emily's new route. The Fat Controller has added some special trains at the summer timetable, and assigns Emily to the Flour Mill Special. James, on the other hand, has the Black Lock Run, and makes it out to be quite bad. Unfortunately for Emily, the trucks make it difficult for her to keep to time, and she ends up ramming them off the tracks and ruining the flour. The Fat Controller then has her take over the Black Lock Run, and at first everything James described seems to be true, but she resolves to see it through to the end for her passengers, and comes to see it's much better than she thought. In future, I'd like to do a full deep dive into this episode and why I love it so much. But for now, I'll focus on why I put it above the others. Rather than doing what Bubba did with Forever and Ever, where the message was basically suck it up and deal with the changes, you have no say in the matter, this episode encourages you not to. Sure, there are a lot of changes, but when utilized in the right way, they can make some great stories. It also made sure to follow up on Season 7, both using Emily as the main character and following up on A Bad Day at Castle Lock. There's also the way they use the trucks, how they characterized Emily, and so much more. Again, I'd like to cover this episode in further detail, but hopefully this can give you an idea of why I ranked it so high. For a long time, the hit era has been looked down on by most of the fandom, but with the low point the series has gotten to as of late, more and more people seem to be giving it a second chance, and I often see new episodes being brought to light. And while there are quite a few bad episodes of the era, the only thing we had to compare it to back then was the classic series. It naturally wasn't going to match that level of quality, but for what it's worth, I think for every bad episode of the era, there's also a really good one to match. Now my question is, what are your thoughts on the hit era? And what are your 10 best and worst episodes? That's all I have to say for today, so I'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day, and stay really useful.